Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and joy to be together with you for the last of our 4 classes on positivity bias. Tonight's class, I don't want to sound, like I'm biased. So, but tonight's class is going to be the most important, perhaps, of all 4, and explain to you why in a few minutes. Let's first begin with a story. In 1977, there was a 5-week period when the Chabad Lubavitch movement and people all over the world were anxiously praying for the recovery of the Rebbe after he suffered a massive heart attack during the celebration of Simchas Torah inside 770. There's obviously many, many stories and many details about this very traumatic time in Chabad. You can imagine during the most packed night of the year, Simchas Torah 770 was full to the bleachers because many, probably thousands of Jews that were elsewhere for holidays would come for Simchas Torah. And during the dancing, the Rebbe sat down and he had a heart attack that was very, very severe. Really, most people might not have ever survived from such a heart attack. And Dr. Ira Weiss, who was a Chicago-based cardiologist, flew to New York during the holiday in order to help treat the Rebbe. And he says that the fact that 38 days later, on the first day of the month of Kislev, 38 days later, the Rebbe was able to go home and to resume his communal activities is beyond miraculous. Most people would be worrying about the possibility of survival, and one would discount any possibility of functionality at the level of the Rebbe. Now, obviously, whoever's familiar with Chabad knows that from that heart attack from 1977 until the stroke that the Rebbe had in 1994, the Rebbe was a very, very active person. But I want to show you one story of that time, which is going to be very important for launching the conversation that we will have tonight, which will address the question that I sent in the email earlier today, which maybe I should have started the class with, which is, does all of this discussion that we've been having for the last few weeks about positive thinking, about how we frame our realities, does it actually change anything, or is it only mind games? Is it actually real? Is there actually some real value to changing the way we think? Like realistically, or is it purely just you're fooling yourself? So I want to show you the following story that happened. When the Rebbe went to his room after the heart attack, the doctors that came, with Dr. Feldman that was there in 770, other people that were there were trying to convince the Rebbe to go to the hospital. The Rebbe refused to go. He refused to go. So one of the doctors that was there, he stayed there, and they brought a hospital to the Rebbe, etc. At that time, there was a doctor called Dr. Robert Feldman. He was there. And he told the Rebbe that some of the Hasidim were still dancing outside and downstairs in honor of Simchas Torah, etc. And when the Rebbe heard this, the Rebbe had a huge smile on his face. And the words that Dr. Feldman used when he told the Rebbe that there were Hasidim that were singing and dancing during the celebration of Simchas Torah, despite the fact that the Rebbe had had a major heart attack, the words he used was they were having Shira Vizimra. Shira Vizimra means song and celebration and dancing, song and joy. And he saw how the Rebbe smiled then, and the Rebbe was not doing well. So again, later he mentioned the word Shira Vizimra, and he knows that the Rebbe again smiled. And so the only words, the rest of the time that Dr. Feldman was involved in treating the Rebbe, the only thing that he could say to kind of give the Rebbe some joy, to make him happy, was to tell them that the Hasidim were b'shira, b'zimra, they were with joy and celebration. And there were many other people then that the Rebbe sent clear messages that people should continue to celebrate the holiday, they should not stop the celebrations. These 2 words became like a mantra by Dr. Feldman, so much so that he describes that years later on Simchas Torah, he got smashed. He was holding the Torah, and someone didn't realize was jumping on his head because it was so crowded. He felt like he was going to faint from the from the crowds that were squishing and pushing, trying to bring the Torah back to the Aron Kodesh, that he literally felt that he would faint holding the Torah. And with the last strength, he managed like somehow get to the ark to put the Torah back. And he was like, just like, how do I get out of here? He felt so weak. And the Rebbe called him over to the stage. The Rebbe told him, would you not agree that my medicine is better than your medicine, the best medicine? He looked for a second. The Rebbe told him, Shir, I don't know what the Rebbe said, Shir V'Zimra, he realized on his own. And the Rebbe was referring to the songs and the dancing and the joy of all the people in 770. During the dancing is the best form of medicine that a person could have. That kind of rejuvenated him. 14 years later, on 27th of Adar, the Rebbe was at the Ohel, the grave of the previous Rebbe, and he had a stroke. Serious stroke, and again, Dr. Feldman was called upon to tend to the Rebbe. They brought the Rebbe back to 770 in the ambulance after the stroke, and the secretaries were all there, and he walked over to the Rebbe, and the first words the Rebbe said to Dr. Feldman, as he came over to see what was going on, was Shira V'Zimra. And he thought, Dr. Feldman thought, maybe I'm taking this out of context, maybe I'm hearing things, but the Rebbe kept on repeating, Shira V'Zimra. In fact, the only words the Rebbe said, Shira V'Zimra, kept on repeating it over and over. And that, as Dr. Feldman says the story, it's like imagine that you and your wife went through a situation, and now you got through it, and now you're presented with a similar situation, you feel like deja vu, and wow, it's all happening all over again. Been there, done that. And this is how he felt. And the Rebbe felt just like the singing and the dancing of the Hasidim helped me pull through my heart attack 14 years earlier, so too the joy, the celebration will help me pull through the stroke that I had. So let me ask you a question. What is the role of joy in Judaism? You see the big joy behind me on this virtual background. What is the role of joy in Judaism? And let me explain to you why I'm asking this question. Long before it was popular for people to be happy and what's called today's positive psychology and the importance of the way you think, the world was not necessarily a happy place, especially not religious people. In general, when you think of any religion, whether it's Judaism or Lahavdil, other religions, you think of, dark, gloomy synagogues or other places. You think of like mean-looking, foreboding rabbis. Judaism was not fun necessarily. A lot of fear, a lot of punishment, and this was true in really the whole spiritual mindset of many, many generations of human history. The first people to really introduce joy into their lives as Jews was the Hasidim. Before the Baal Shem Tov and before the 18th century, there was no before the 15th century, there was no concept of joy in regular living. Now, obviously, there was the idea of Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. You should serve God with joy, and there's the idea of Simcha shel Mitzvah, of having celebration and excitement when doing a mitzvah. And Judaism is not against having joy in serving God and joy in doing a mitzvah. But to be happy to be alive, to be joyful just for the sake of joy in and of itself, is something that the world didn't really experience. And in fact, when the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, was arrested by the Tsar's government, one of the claims that the opponents of Hasidus used against the Alter Rebbe was that he's trying to start a new religion, not Judaism. One of the proofs that they had, the religion, quote unquote, the religion of the Alter Rebbe is a new kind of religion, was the fact that the Hasidim are always happy. Always happy is not a Jewish thing. In fact, Hasidim are called the Freiliche. And if you speak a little bit of Yiddish, Freiliche means the happy ones. The happy ones. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov has a whole new perspective on life. I'm going to show you what the Baal Shem Tov says, one-liner. The Baal Shem Tov said, a Jew must strive to be joyful at all times. This is from Tzavas HaRevash, from the will, the last will and testament of the Baal Shem Tov. is that a Jew must strive to be joyful, not only when he's serving God, not only when he's doing a mitzvah, but at all times. At all times. It's a fascinating concept, a revolutionary idea, something that the world had never really heard of before. And therefore, Hasidus brought into the world this idea that everything that a person does, everything, whether it's eating or sleeping or business or vacation or a birthday party, you think you're having a birthday party, every single part of your life has to be elevated and included within part of your divine service to have the proper intentions. And since you have to have joy when serving God, and since every single part of your life has to be included in the concept of serving God, therefore a person must constantly, always, consistently be involved in serving God with joy. So the question we need to understand tonight is, why is this? Why is it so important that we need to be happy when we're eating breakfast? Why is it important that we need to be happy when we are going on vacation, when we're working and we're paying our bills? And what I'm going to explain tonight is going to be the greatest revolution of the last 4 weeks. See, until now, we've been discussing the importance of reframing our realities. So life is 10% reality, 90% perspective, and obviously the way two people can look at the same thing and see very different results, and the way that you choose to frame and to look and what kind of glasses you use to look at your circumstances will directly influence what kind of situation you think you're actually dealing with. So that was lesson 1. We talked about ending off experiences with a positive note, making sure the ending is good, so this way you think of it as a good thing. We talked about the relationships, how to always find something good in somebody else. But all these ideas are basically where maybe what happened is good is not good, but I'm changing my perspective. I'm not actually changing the reality. I'm choosing how to look at that reality, how to internalize that reality, how to make that reality my reality, or those facts my reality better. Tonight, what we are going to discover is that the way I think about something actually changes the reality. It actually changes the reality. Let me tell you a story. The second Chabad Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, had a son called Reb Nachum. Reb Nachum was very, very talented on a horse. Aside from being a very big scholar, obviously, a very righteous child, he was gifted. He knew how to ride horses. He knew to do many, many amazing tricks. He would entertain on the horse. Now, the Mittler Rebbe also had a choir called the Kapelya. Kapelya means a choir in. Kapelya means. A second, I just turned on. Kapelya means a choir in. There we go. Kapelya means a choir in English. An orchestra choir. So the Mittler Rebbe had on special occasions he would ask the Kapelya, these Hasidim, to sing songs, and they would entertain the Hasidim with their songs, with their music, etc. And so one day, a random day, middle of the day, when nothing special was happening, nothing unique was happening, the Mittler Rebbe came out and told the Kapelya that I want you to start to sing. Very happy, lively songs. I want a whole orchestra, a whole presentation of happy melodies. And then they said, I want my son Nachum, with some other people that were good horses, to start doing tricks on horseback. So they made a whole show, and seemingly for no apparent reason, the Capella, the choir, is singing these happy songs, and Reb Nachum is doing all these, is entertaining the people in the crowd with his horse tricks. And in fact, the Mittler Rebbe is standing there, he's watching on the porch, watching all the action. Suddenly, Reb Nachum falls off the horse. His life was in danger. He fell off, he got run over the horse, and he run to the Rebbe and said, "Your son is in great danger, he's in critical condition." And the Rebbe merely mentioned with a hand, like waving it up, that you continue with the singing. They were shocked, such a serious accident. But the Rebbe said he wanted them to continue singing. So they kept on singing, and he wanted them to keep on dancing, etc. The festivities should continue. After a while, Father Rebbe said they can stop, and he went back into his private office. Obviously, then a doctor had come, and they had taken Reb Nachum off of the stage and all that, where they were performing in the field. And the doctor comes to Reb Nachum, to the Rebbe, so he examined Reb Nachum, and the situation is far less severe than previously thought. He'd broken a leg, and he'd been in a lot of pain, and just some scratches, a lot of blood and scratches, but nothing permanent. He will be okay. Then they asked the Rebbe, and here's the point of the story. Why did he tell the whole choir and the horsemen to continue their performance when his beloved son was laying there injured? So the doctor says to the Rebbe, "Your son just got hurt, and you tell him to keep on playing as if nothing happened?" So the Rebbe responds to the doctor and says, "Why don't you ask me an even better question? Why are you asking me why I continue the performance? Why don't you ask me why there was a performance in the first place? It's a regular Tuesday, a regular week, and a regular day. There's no holiday today, no special occasion today. So why did I even ask for the choir to sing and the riders to dance and to make all their tricks?" The Mittler Rebbe said, "I saw in heaven that in the heavenly court there was a gzeira, there was a decree against my son. And he was supposed to die. And the prosecution was very powerful. And I know there's only one way to break it, and that is joy, because joy sweetens divine severity. So I called upon the choir to sing and the dancers to dance and to do their tricks. And the joy of the celebrations tempered, it weakened, softened the strict decree against my son. But there's still a small portion of the decree remained. That's why he fell off the horse and hurt his leg. However, because I made sure the dancing and the celebration should continue, this had even less, it weakened even more the decree, that it should be even less impactful, that the decree shall be for a short while, but nothing permanent should remain of the decree. And God willing, my son will recover, 100%. What's so amazing about this story is that in this story, we're seeing an amazing concept. We're seeing that the joy of the dancing and the joy of the celebration didn't just allow the Mittler Rebbe to, reframe the situation. The joy of the situation actually allowed the situation to be changed. Let me repeat that. It's not that the Mittler Rebbe was being happy, because through the happiness, you're in a better frame of mind, you feel better about your life, you feel happier, you feel more content. No. The Mittler Rebbe told us, Hasidim, told the doctor, that by the celebration that we were dancing and singing, that actually changed what was planned in heaven to happen. What was planned to happen didn't happen. Instead, something else happened instead. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Amazing thing. What's amazing is that normally in Hasidic literature and Hasidic stories, we usually we find the emphasis on joy, but we find more of an emphasis on sincerity, on humility, on brokenheartedness, on the power of a person, a simple Jew who connects to God with all their heart and soul, and that this vulnerability and this brokenness is considered a sacred entry point into the inner pathways that lead us to the divinity. There's an amazing story. It's the exact opposite message of the joy, but it's a beautiful story. It's a Rosh Hashanah story that will help you appreciate the contrast and the novelty of what I'm saying, which is that one year the Baal Shem Tov, this is an amazing story, guys. Here's a story. One year, the Baal Shem Tov came to Reb Zev Kitzis, who was one of his very well-known, righteous, holy students. And he said to Rabbi Zev Kitzis, this year, you will be the one that will be honored to blow the shofar for us in Shul this year at Rosh Hashanah. I want you to study all the kavanot, all the mystical meditation that are described in Kabbalah, that the Arizal describes, all the thoughts that you need to know when you blow the shofar, that you should meditate upon when you blow. I want you to study, prepare yourself to be the Baal Tokei, the one that blows the shofar. Obviously, needless to say, Rabbi Zev applies himself to the task, and he starts to study and to study. On one hand, he feels honored and privileged to have this great job, this honor of blowing the shofar for the community. On the other hand, he feels a tremendous responsibility. It's not just an honor. It comes with tremendous obligation, both to know the halachot, to know all the laws properly, and to appreciate the spiritual meditation for the Baal Shem Tov, to blow for the Baal Shem Tov. As he began to study every Kabbalistic source about the different significance of the shofar, the different meditation, and each individual note, what level it achieves, and what level of reality in the chambers of the soul. There was so much that he was studying, if you remember, he was afraid he would forget. So he actually prepared himself like a cheat sheet, piece of paper, and he wrote in like short the main points of each kavanah, of each meditation that he had to have in mind. So when you get ready to blow the actual shofar, you look at his paper and you see the first kia represents this level, this represents this, etc. Finally, the great moment arrives. It's the morning of Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Zev comes into the bima in the center of the shul, surrounded by the Torah scrolls, all the people standing on the talis over their heads, ready for the most awe-inspiring moment of the entire Rosh Hashanah service. And you can see in the corner, in the east wall, is the Baal Shem Tov, his face of flame. The room is silent. Everyone is ready. And Zev reaches into his pocket to take out the paper, all the notes, and his heart froze. The paper was gone. The paper had disappeared. He clearly remembered placing it in his pocket that morning. He was double-checked before, but it was gone. He starts to search in this note and that. He starts, maybe I put a different pocket, maybe I put it on my plate. He wants to, and all of a sudden, panic overtakes him. And as he's putting his hands every pocket, in his jacket, in his pants, in his everywhere, into his talus bag, into his chauffeur bag, he's panicking. As the more he searches, the more his brain blanks on him, and he can't think. The whole synagogue is waiting. The whole shul is standing there silently waiting for him to begin the blessings on the shofar. And he has no choice. He can't wait any longer. Everyone's waiting. Everyone's looking at him. And tears of frustration fill his eyes. He takes the shofar in his hand. He says the blessing. He says, quick, think. What's the meditation for the first blowing? But his brain is too stressed out. And he can't remember anything. And as he blows each and every note, he falls into deeper depression, deeper dismay, until tears are pouring down his face. And he blows the shofar, and all he thinks is, I just got to finish blowing the shofar. I am the biggest disappointment. I am the biggest failure. I messed up this shofar blowing terribly. The Baal Shem Tov will never forgive me. It's a disaster. And he blows the shofar without a single meditation, not one single kavanah, like a simple Jew. At the conclusion of it, and he was so embarrassed the whole time during Musa blowing the shofar, he's hiding his head. He felt like from the depths of his heart, he felt like a failure. The moment that the services are over, Reb Zev sees out of the corner of his eye, the Baal Shem Tov is coming straight towards him. He wants to bury himself in the ground, but he can't run away. The Baal Shem Tov is coming, and the Baal Shem Tov comes and says, "Good Yom Tov, Reb Zev." That was the most extraordinary shofar blowing I have ever heard. But Rebbe, that was just to say it was a disaster. I didn't know anything. I felt like a failure. Baal Shem Tov told him the following: in the king's palace, there are many different gates and many different doors that lead to many different halls and chambers and rooms and offices. And the palace keepers have great key rings. You know, like people are really busy, like when we were in camp, like the guy in charge has like a key ring like this big, like 45 different keys. Each different key opens a different room. But there is one key that fits all the locks. There is a master key that opens every single door. Says the Baal Shem Tov to Rabbi Zev Kitzis, each individual kavana, each individual meditation is one individual door that you can access another chamber of the supernal world through your meditation, through your thoughts, etc. Each one is a different meditation. But then there is one master key through which you are able to open up every single door in heaven. Every door can be opened with this master key. You know what that master key is? The master key is a broken heart. Your broken heart when you blew the shofar, your true feeling of humbleness and of nullification and no ego, that was the ultimate opening of all the gates. So normally, I share this story. Why? Because normally we say, you want to change reality in heaven? Pray hard, cry to God, fast. For many, many centuries, Jews, when they had a difficult situation, they would fast. They would go into mourning. They would do what we call slichot, and they would do supplications to God, and they would do sigufim, and they would break their bodies, and they would mourn, and they would, punish themselves. That's how they would think, that if you need to change God's decree, pray hard, give charity, cry to Hashem for mercy. However, the Baal Shem Tov is telling us something completely different. Let me read to you the following verse, the following statement from the Baal Shem Tov. Are you ready for this? Says the Baal Shem Tov in Poras Yosef, if tears are the key to open up the heavenly gates, joy absolutely demolishes them. Yes, it's true that there's individual kavanot, there's individual gates that are open with individual prayers and individual psalms, and individual meditations. That's all true. And yes, it's true that there is a master key that can open any gate, and that is the broken heart of a Jew when he cries out to God with true sincerity and with a broken heart and with tears falling down his face. But you know what breaks the gates? Do you know what destroys the limitations? Talmud tells us, Simcha poretz geder. Joy breaks all boundaries. When you're joyful, there is no need for a key, because the joy destroys any obstacles that we may have. This idea is revolutionary. Now, we're living in a time today where you see it, and this is the Jewish community has come around to this way of thinking. But you have to understand, when the Baal Shem Tov began to teach these ideas, it was counterintuitive. I mean, this is why there was tremendous opposition to the ways of the Baal Shem Tov. Because we often think, traditional religion, all religions think that you want to get to God, you want to change a negative decree, heartfelt prayer and tears and desperation. Mittler Rebbe is telling us a story where his son was decreed to die. And yet the Mittler Rebbe broke the decree. He transformed the reality. Not that he changed, he reframed the story. Not that he was able to think about it in a positive way. The joy of the happiness of the dancing actually changed the reality to a different reality. So how does that work? How do we change reality? Tonight I'm going to teach you five Yiddish words. Every class we've had a few words that I was able to condense the class into a word. Tonight's class will be condensed not into one word, but into 5 words. Tracht gut wird sein gut, which means tracht gut, think good, and it will be good. In English is more than 5. Think good. Say this. Remember these words. Tracht gut. I don't have a class in front of me, but I can imagine that you're all sitting here together. So you're sitting at home and say tracht gut. Think good. Wird sein gut. It will be good. Meaning, just the act of thinking good, just the act of thinking good Vet sein good. What does vet sein good means? It will actually become good. It will actually become good. So this is an amazing teaching from the third Chabad Rebbe. Let's read the story of, let's read this. I thought we missed the Zohar. We'll read it afterwards. I'm going to read with you a story of the background. Let me find my Zoom here. Read with you a story that will give light to this. The son of one of the followers of the Tzemach Tzedek once fell seriously ill. The father of the ill boy was advised to travel to the village of Lubavitch, to the Tzemach Tzedek, and to get his blessing. With a heavy heart, he made the difficult trek to the Rebbe. In response to his request for a blessing, Tzemach Tzedek pronounced, "Tracht gut, that sein gut." Think good, and it will be good. Not that it will become, you'll feel good, but it actually will be good. Chassid took these words to heart, and during his entire homeward journey, he strove to strengthen his trust in God and visualize a good outcome for his son. When he returned home, he was shocked to see his son completely healed, back to his normal self. Okay? This is a true story told by the Rebbe. This is where we get these words, "Trachten vet sein gut," and when you think good, it actually, vet sein gut, it will be good. Now, this may sound naive. This may sound like Facebook cliches. I'm not a fan personally of Facebook cliches. When you go into, Barnes and Nobles is no longer. We lost our Barnes and Nobles in Coral Springs, but until recently you went to Barnes and Noble, there was a whole section, aisles and aisles of books of self-help, full of different lines like this: think good and be good. But it sounds like some feel-good platitude, like a bumper sticker, like a soundbite. But is it reality? Not only is it not, you might argue it's not reality, you might argue that it's actually counterproductive. Because what happens if you try and visualize this excellent result and you convince yourself that everything is going to be positive, everything is going to be good, and then in the end, you know what happens? Nothing. Imagine you say, it's going to be good. You're going to be healthy. My son's going to be healed. It's not going to be any illness. And then you're positive, and then the ending is not so positive. The ending is not what you were hoping for. And now, because you have such high expectations, it's going to be a very, very low fall down. There's an article in Scientific American that suggested that imagining the worst outcome is actually better for you than imagining a good outcome. Because if you envision and plan for a worst case scenario, you'll never be let down. You can only be surprised. You can only be pleasantly surprised. But if you imagine a good scenario and then it doesn't work out good, you'll be disappointed. It's another article. The tyranny of positive thinking can threaten your health and happiness. The whole theory that if you think too positive, then you blame yourself for your own sadness or failure, etc. However, despite what I just read to you from some modern day scientists, thinking good is actually not just a way of changing expectations. Thinking good is actually a way of changing reality. Changing reality. I'm going to show you a video. Not yet. Before I show the video, let me first. I'll show you the video first. We'll go this way. Let me share with you an amazing video. Let's share sounds. What do I have to find?
Rabbi Avraham Rottenberg is an educator living in Israel. In 1957, while en route to Israel from Brazil, he stopped in New York for an audience with the Rebbe.
נכנסתי לפנות בוקר, הייתי נראה אחרון בתור ככה, כי לא הייתה לי, נכנסתי ודיברתי המון זמן עם הרבי, ברזיל ועל חינוך וכולו, והוא המליץ, אמרתי כך, אמרתי שאולי כדאי שנשאר פה קצת, שנהיה מורה פה, מה חסרים פה מורים, שם יותר חסרים מורים, אבל אמרתי, יש מי שימלא את מקומי שם, וקיבלתי משרה בניו יורק, ונשארתי שם 2 כל שנה, לקראת סוף השנה, אני לקחתי את כל הכיתה ונכנסתי לרבי. כל הכיתה, והוא נתן שיחה בפניהם, כן, כל שנה ככה, משהו מיוחד. יום אחד אני מקבל מכתב מהבית, אחי כותב מכתב, אני זוכר יום חמישי בערב, כותב מכתב, אומר, שאבא קיבל התקפת לב, והוא במצב אנוש. עכשיו המכתב הזה יצא, נגיד ביום ראשון, ואני קיבלתי אותו ביום חמישי. היה קשה להבין את זה, איך לא מטלפנים, איך אני לא יודע מה, איך לא שולחים מברק, שום דבר לא, כתבו ככה. עכשיו אני מקבל מכתב כזה, מה אני צריך לחשוב? ומה, כן, אז אני הכנסתי מכתב לרבי, שאחי כתב כך וכך, וכותב שמצב אנוש, וכתבתי, כבר אינני יודע מה לחשוב. כך כתב ש... אז הרבי לקח את המכתב הזה, עשה קו מתחת למילים האלה, כבר אינני יודע מה נחשב, והוא כותב, ולפלא, 3 סימני קריאה ככה, אתה רואה את העוצמה שבזה ככה, ולפלא, שהרי ידוע בכגון דע, ציווי נישואינו רבותינו, טראחטגוט וזיינגוט, ואחכה לבשורות טובות. טוב, קיבלתי את המכתב הזה, ידעתי שם שאני חי, זה יום חמישי בלילה. עובר את השבת, ביום ראשון עזרתי אומץ וטלפנתי הביתה. סך הכל היה לי טלפון ובבית היה טלפון. ואז כל כך היה נדיר לטלפן, אבל היה, מי עושה דברים כאלה? היום מטלפנים 10 פעמים ביום. ואז טוב, אז אמא שלי מרימה את הטלפון, שאלתי אותה מה שלום, אבא יצא מכלל סכנה. שאלתי אותה מתי? היא אמרת לי ביום חמישי. טוב, יפה, טוב. עברתי את הכביש והלכתי במינכה שם ואמרתי שהרבי יוצא ממינכה. נו, יראתם שסטויבס פמיר? שאל אותי. אמרתי לו, כן. עכשיו דיברתי בטלפון, יצא מכלל סכנה. אז הוא שואל אותי מתי? אמרתי לו ביום חמישי בערב. כן? יום חמישי בערב. הוא אומר לי, wenn את ihr umgeben zu trachten gut? מתי אתה התחלת לחשוב טוב? אמרתי לו, מתי אתה התחלת לחשוב טוב? אמרתי לו, מתי שהרבי אמר, מתי זה היה? אני אומר לו, דונה שלי בנחת, ביום חמישי בלילה זה היה. אתה קולט מה אתה מבין, הוא לא בעסק, אז אתה, כן. Soll sich noch einmal nicht treffen, solche Sachen, sollt wissen, alle Mal zu trachten gut. זה שיותר לא יקרו מקרים כאלה, אבל שתדעו תמיד לחשוב טוב.
I got it. Okay. So, there we go. Huh. I just got scared for a second. I thought I had just closed the class. Baruch Hashem, we did it. Okay. So back to what we're saying. So this is an amazing story. It's amazing. It's really amazing. The Rebbe is telling this guy, you are the one who saved your father's life. I know that video was in Hebrew, but I can't say the story that you should appreciate the emotion that he's saying. That the Rebbe is telling him, you saved the Rebbe's life, your father's life. When did you begin to think good? Thursday night? That's when the Rebbe got better. Thursday night. It's absolutely amazing. And so this is going to take us now to understanding this. Let's understand the psychology here. Why is it, how does it work that our thought process can actually change reality? You ready for this, guys? 1963, the Rebbe talked about this. And the Rebbe asked this very question. And the Rebbe began to explain in beautiful ways the philosophical and spiritual dynamic of this concept, that when you think good, it will actually be good. And he began by asking the obvious question that why, on what basis should you believe that you'll always be good? Who says that you deserve to only have good in your life? In fact, isn't it a little bit egotistical? Isn't it a little bit presumptuous to think that everything that happens to me, I deserve to have good happen to me? What about the concept that there's reward and punishment? Sometimes God has to punish us for our mistakes, and God has to punish us for, there's good outcome for righteous behavior, and there's negative outcomes and negative consequences for negative behavior. So, based the whole premise that you deserve to have good, and that if you think good, it will be good, maybe it's not true. Maybe God is punishing you for something you did wrong. Maybe you're not deserving of divine kindness right now. It's a good question. The Rebbe explained as follows. When a person decides to place their faith in God and they trust completely that their current crisis will be resolved favorably, despite the fact that things look very bleak and very bad, at that moment you have in effect risen above your own nature. And when you have risen above your own nature, that reciprocates that God then, so to say, suspends his own nature, his own divine order, and gives you beyond your nature, beyond his nature. Meaning, yes, it's true. It could be that according to the plan, you right now deserve punishment. You right now don't deserve kindness. But if, even though it's natural to worry, and it's natural to get anxious, and it's natural to get stressed out, and yet you overcome your natural tendency to stress and to get, pessimistic, and instead you say it's going to be good, so that causes a reciprocal behavior from above. God is considered like our shadow, so that God is Hashem Shomerach, Hashem Tzilcha. God is your guardian. He is literally the shade over you. But the words, he is a shade over you, can mean he is your shadow. He's a shadow that acts, a shadow behaves the way you behave. You move your arm like this, the shadow moves like this. You move your arm like that, the shadow will go like that. Meaning God understands how difficult and even supernatural it is for a human being to unequivocally trust in him, to the extent that we no longer feel any fear or anxiety. And that we can convince ourselves that even the seemingly hopeless situation will be positive. And therefore, as a result of you thinking good and putting all your trust in Hashem, even though you may not have been deserving of a positive outcome, God's going to give you an ending. Meaning, what we're learning tonight, what we're discovering tonight, is not a psychological value and an emotional benefit to being positive. They're all true. It's all true. We learned it for the last few weeks. There's psychological and emotional value to being positive. But what the Rebbe is explaining to us here, based on the words of the third Chabad Rebbe, is that the power of positive thinking is not only psychological, rather, the positive thinking is actually changing the future reality for the better. It doesn't just help us. Till now, we've been saying that when you think positive, it helps you feel better, it helps you internalize the experience better, helps you manage your stress better, it helps you behave to others and interact in your relationships with others that have many flaws, and you learn how to see the good in them, and you have better relationships. But here we're saying that the positive thinking actually shapes and creates a reality the way we want. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. I read to you a Zohar. We read together a Zohar in A Course in Happiness. But this Zohar is so powerful. It's a Zohar that we should memorize. It's a quote, a statement in the Zohar that has to be internalized and ingrained within our brains to never forget this. Never forget this. So I want to read to you a statement from, wait, we lost it. I have a mistake, so I X'd that. So I'm going to open up my notes again, which is no big deal. Be glad to do that. I'm going to read to you a statement from the Zohar. This thing, I'm going to find it. I'll tell you the story. There was a man, I think it was Rabbi Harari, was in was in Yechidus with the Rebbe. He was in private meeting. He was complaining about something that was going on, how terrible it is, and this and that, and he can't overcome, and whatever. And the Rebbe got up from his chair, walked around the table to the bookcase, pulled out a Zohar, a set of Zohar from the bookcase, opened up to a page, and gave it to this rabbi to read in his office. What did it say in this Zohar? So he opened up, we go back to my Zoom. So he opens up the Zohar. The Rebbe opens up for him the Zohar. You want to see what it says? It says as follows. This is in the Zohar, chapter is the second volume, page 184. Come and observe. Our world is always ready to receive the spiritual flow that emanates from above. Meaning, we're always ready to receive. The upper world provides in accordance with the state below. If the state below is joyous, then correspondingly abundance flows from above. However, if the state below is one of sadness, correspondingly the flow of blessings is constrained. The Zohar is saying explicitly that the reality of the physical world is directly in result of what we are ready to receive. If you're ready to receive happiness, you receive blessings. If you're in a state of pessimism, if you're in a state of contraction, if you're in a state of depression, you know what you're going to get? Depressing news. We create our realities. We create our realities. Recently, I was speaking to someone, told me this person is going to die because whatever, they're going to kill their mother. So God forbid to say that. We don't ever, we don't, al tiftach peh satan. You don't open your mouth to give credence, to give to this truth. But if you create a reality of negativity, then you're allowing that reality to become, you're creating a vessel for such a reality. Whereas if you say it's going to be good, it's going to be able to be healthy, everything's going to work out fine, we're going to have enough money, we're going to have enough this, we're going to have, it's going to, guess what? You create a vessel to receive that. If you create a vessel, God will give it to you. And on a personal level, I wasn't planning on personal, but this is how I live my life, and it's so important. When you live your life this way, when you say, if I make the vessel, then God will fill the vessel, then it's not a problem to have 7 kids. How are you going to afford 7 kids? How are you going to afford to buy a bigger house? If it's a lot of money, I mean, you need a bigger house, you need a lot of kids, you want a lot of guests. How can you afford it? How can you afford to renovation, the shul? How can you afford everything that we do? There's not any one thing, but the children is the best example. That's the biggest. People are afraid. I can't have kids till I have a career, until I have at least I don't know, $500,000 in a retirement account or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. If you believe that it's going to work out, and if you believe that God will take care of you, that belief becomes a vessel. That belief becomes the receptacle to receive, and God will give you commensurate and relative to what you're ready for. Here's the point. Let me explain this. Heaven and earth are in constant communication with each other. It's not like God is going to do what he wants to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do, and God will do what he wants regardless of me. No, the Zohar says it's explicit. It's a basic idea in Judaism that what happens down here on earth impacts the heavenly response. I mean, that's the idea of why God gives us mitzvot. And since we believe that what happens down here on earth sets the tone for the heavenly response, that's why we believe we can intervene and we can impact reality in partnership with God. That's the whole idea of prayer. What's prayer? Prayer is that I believe that my prayers can change God's mind, right? Isn't that what prayer is? So if you pray, if you call the rabbi to pray, it means that you believe in the ability of human beings to have an impact on what God is going to do. So once you accept this premise that God will allow us to change and to influence what reality he will make for us, what situations and what circumstances he will give us. Then if you believe in prayer, then even deeper and more important than the actual words of the prayer is the way in which we say the prayer. When you say the prayers, are you like really just saying just to fulfill your obligation of saying it like, okay, God, I gotta pray for healing, Torah, but really I think she's gonna die, and we're really filled with grief, or are we happy? Are we with joy? Are we, God, this is gonna happen? Meaning our mood, our emotions during prayer, and even during the rest of the day, and when we're at work, and when we're at home, and when we're interacting with our spouse, with our kids, and with our friendships, they become the carrier waves. They become the vehicle through which God gives us our blessings. In fact, that's why, as I said before, Simcha Poretz Keder. Not I didn't say it. I quoted it before. I'm repeating what I quoted before. Simcha breaks all boundaries. And the Rebbe talked about it so many times. Normally, if you walk into a room and you see a guy that you don't know who, you barely know his name, would you go put your arm around his shoulder and, hey, let's go dance together? Well, think you're nuts. Would you go give him a big hug and let's say, grab his arm and start twirling him in circles? Sugar. But if you're walking during a dead wedding and you're both in a very happy mood because you're celebrating a very, very special, exciting, happy occasion, it's a wedding, when you're happy, the normal limitations, the normal reservations, the normal boundaries between people disappear. When you're happy, there's no more, it's open. And that's why the Rebbe wanted Hasidim to sing and to be joyous on the holiday when he had a heart attack. Not because he wanted them to be happy and to ignore, some people say, don't let me ruin your party. That's what I was saying. The Rebbe understood that the joy of the Hasidim dancing on Simchas Torah would directly change the reality of his medical condition. He understood that our happiness creates a vehicle, creates a vessel for the greater happiness, knowing that the Rebbe is healthy and healed and able to return back to the Hasidim. So the joy we had on Simchas Torah allowed and created the ability to have the joy on the day that the Rebbe left 770 to go back home to his wife. This is the final point of this wonderful series we have together, which is that it's true that we may not always be deserving of goodness. And it's true that there may be some times that we experience things that are negative, where we experience real sickness. Are we going to pretend that the sickness is a blessing and the sickness is actually a good thing and that it's actually holy? No. The sickness is sickness. And if we lose our good job, God forbid, because of whatever, so we lost our job, God forbid. Someone, the bad happens, the bad things happen. So yes, from a psychological perspective, you need to constantly work on changing your mindset and finding the positive and reframing it and trying to see how the fact that I lost my job, yes, on one hand, it's a very negative situation, but maybe it's going to be the opportunity for me to find a better job, which there's countless stories of people that were complacent in a certain job or a certain environment or a certain place, and then they were fired or whatever, they had no choice. They went on to become like multimillionaires. So that's important. It's important to always try and find the good in the situation, especially at the end of a situation, find the good in other people. But the ultimate in positivity bias, the ultimate in a positive lifestyle is actually always thinking positive. Always thinking big, thinking good, thinking great, thinking wonderful, because that actually creates the reality. That creates the reality. That's easier said than done. I understand. Easier said than done. So I'm going to end off with this final story. So anyone watching this tonight and in the future that thinks sounds good, and I'm glad that the rabbi can live that way, and I'm glad that he can be happy, and I'm glad that he can be positive, he can have a lot of faith in God and have a lot of bitachon, a lot of trust that God will provide for his 7 kids. but I can't live that way. I can't have more than 2 kids because I don't, in my budget, I don't see how I can afford to have a third child. In my budget, I don't see how I can afford to get married or how I could afford to give charity because I don't see it. I can't afford it. Give charity, and you'll see God will give you the vessel. God will give you the blessings of the vessel you created. But for those of you that are watching, I think that what I said is too esoteric. Who think that even though they pray, and I want to repeat this, even though they pray and they admit and they recognize that the reason why they're praying is because they believe in the power of human beings to change the will of God. So believe that the power of positivity can change the way you talk to God, not the what you say, but the way you say will change the way God will give to you. Because God give you the same money with a lot of stress. I must definitely give you a client will give you the money will make you crazy for 4 months first, or God give you a client, give you the money without even blinking an eye. So if you think this is too great for you, I want to end with the following story. Rabbi Zalman Garagi was due to have a very serious operation. He was very worried about a serious surgery. So he arranged to have a private meeting with the Rebbe before the surgery. And during the yechidus, during the meeting, he asked the Rebbe for a blessing that the surgery should be a success. The Rebbe grew very serious. The Rebbe said very strongly, instead of asking that I pray that the surgery be successful, you could have asked me to pray that you shouldn't need surgery at all. Why are you asking that you should have surgery with the anesthesia, with the incision, and with the rehab, and with the pain, and ask that it should go okay? Should have asked that you shouldn't need surgery. The issue should go away by themselves. The chassid, Zalman Garagi, realized his mistake. In the meeting, he said, Rebbe, I'm asking you for a bracha that I don't need any surgery at all. The Rebbe told him, it's too late. I can only work with the faith that you had when you entered my office. I can only work with the faith you had when you entered my office. In other words, the way I understand what the Rebbe is saying over here is that I can only work with the level of faith that you have in God, not the level of faith that I have in God. Meaning, the chassid wasn't lacking faith in God. Zalman Garagi was a holy man. He was a big rabbi, big chassid. And that's why when he had a health issue, what did he do? He turned to the Rebbe. He wanted a bracha from a tzaddik, recognizing that the doctor is the agent of God, but the true source of healing and of well-being comes from a heavenly spiritual source. So he believed in God. Nevertheless, the extent of his faith in God was limited. The extent of his faith of God was that the surgery, I'm going to have to have surgery because the doctor said I need to have surgery. I'm asking God to help the doctor does a good job in the surgery. Meaning there was a certain limitation of faith that the medical view created, it dictated the parameters of the vessel, of the vehicle of blessing he would have. So the Rebbe is telling him, why are you limiting God to the parameters of the medical opinion that you got that you needed surgery? Why are you limiting the extent of God's kindness to what a doctor told you? That's what the Rebbe was saying to him. Yes, you have faith. And yes, I will bless you based upon the level of faith that you expressed. But you should realize that you're limiting your faith to a reality created by a doctor. So the biggest, if you only come with a cup this big, then I can't give you more than this much water. You came in with a cup to receive a blessing that was limited by what the doctor said. So the blessing you can receive. The reason why I'm ending with this story, though, is because it's a very important message, which is that faith is not monolithic. Faith is not black or white. It's not either you have faith or you don't have faith. There are many, many levels of faith. We each possess some level of faith. Every Jew has some level of belief in God. And all of you that are a part of this class and are watching, you all believe in God and you all have faith that God can do goodness and kindness and help you and sustain you. And that's why you all pray, and that's why you all do mitzvot, etc. However, what level of faith you're at, how big are the vessels of your faith? How great is your trust in Hashem that you're willing to expand your vessels, confident that God will give you bigger blessings? That's up to you. That's up to you. It's an amazing thought that we're going to end tonight with. God imbued us with a tremendous power and a tremendous gift. He is allowing us to choose the interface. He's allowing us to choose the size of the blessings we get from him. Imagine. God's, I'm going to give you blessings. How many blessings do you want? You choose. You choose. You want big blessings? Sure. Ask for big blessings, I'll give you big blessings. Or you want to ask only small blessings, I'll give you small blessings. God allows us to choose what kind of blessings we're going to get from him. What kind of reality, what kind of situation, what kind of facts, what kind of income, what kind of health, what kind of being and relationships we're going to get. God lets us choose what to ask for. Questions on us. What are we asking for? Meaning, not just what are we asking for, what vessel of faith are we coming to God with? And the more that we work on the positivity bias, and the more that we work on developing a positive mindset, the more that God reciprocates our positivity with his positivity. And again, it's not monolithic. Today you can be holding here, and you're going to work and being a little bit more positive, and then the blessing that God gives you will be a little bit bigger. And the more that you go bigger, and the more you're more positive, and the more you're more optimistic, and the more you're more joyful and cheerful and happy and smiling, the more reasons God will give you to be happy and joyful and generous and smiling. My dear friends, we are ending 4 weeks together of hopefully life-changing ideas that will help you reframe the circumstances of your life, help you find positive ways of changing the way you view and remember and internalize experiences of your life, ways to find good in everyone you interact with so that your relationships can be happy and meaningful, and most importantly, to empower you to actually change your mindset and thereby change the blessings God gives you. And with that, I bless all of you. May you continue to grow on this journey of faith in God that's very much connected with happiness and joy in living. And the more you believe, the more you'll be happy. And the more that you're happy, the more you'll believe. And may we continue to grow and to grow step by step, constantly strengthen our happiness and deepen our belief and grow. And then in turn, may God continue to shower upon us bigger blessings and the greater blessings, giving us more and more happiness in our lives. Feel free to review these classes, share them, live them most importantly, and you'll have lots of blessings, God willing, in return.